Here is the number to keep in mind before your next grocery run. 18%. That is how much higher food prices could be by the end of this year, based on supply data models tracking dozens of commodities across global markets. And the part most people still have not connected is this. Grocery inflation does not begin at the checkout lane. It starts much earlier, in shipping routes, fertilizer plants, planting windows, and missed deliveries that barely make the evening news. Right now, one of the most important choke points in the world is disrupting fertilizer movement. Roughly a third of global fertilizer trade moves through that corridor, and traffic has fallen sharply. That matters because nitrogen fertilizer supports major crops like corn, wheat, and rice. If farmers do not get enough during planting season, they do not simply catch up later. Lower yields get locked in. The grocery store usually feels that months afterward, which is why shelves can still look normal right before prices turn ugly. The warnings are already there. International food agencies are flagging supply stress. Fertilizer prices in the US have already jumped hard this year. So this is not panic, it is timing. And if Q3 and Q4 are when households feel the pressure, the cheaper move is to prepare before the sticker shock hits. That is what this list is for. 31 foods to stockpile before global tensions and supply pressure reach your pantry indirectly. And stay with me to the end, because the most important item is also the one most people forget until it is too late. Instant mashed potatoes sound unremarkable, which is usually a good sign. The foods people overlook are often the ones with the best cost-to-use ratio. A single canister gives you fast, hot calories with very little effort. Add boiling water, stir, and in a few minutes you have something filling, soft, and familiar. In a disruption, convenience is not laziness. It is efficiency. These are dehydrated potato flakes, so the shelf life can stretch into the 15 to 20-year range when stored properly in sealed conditions. That is extraordinary for something that still feels like normal food. They also do more than people expect. Use them as a side, thicken soups, top a shepherd's pie, or mix in canned chicken and shelf-stable cheese for a complete meal. There is also a morale angle here that gets dismissed too easily. Warm comfort food lowers friction. When every meal starts to feel improvised, something as simple as mashed potatoes can make the pantry feel less like a backup plan and more like a kitchen. Start with one large container per person. It is cheap insurance, and it leads naturally into another item built on the same logic. Low cost, fast prep, endless flexibility. Ramen noodles are not a meal plan. They are a platform. That distinction matters. At around 25 cents a pack in some stores, and roughly 350 to 400 calories each, ramen remains one of the cheapest ways to buy shelf-stable energy. If your goal is stretching dollars while building backup meals quickly, very few foods compete with it. The mistake is treating ramen as something you stock and then resent. Think of it as the base layer. Add an egg, canned chicken, dried seaweed, dehydrated vegetables, chili crisp, or a spoon of shelf-stable cheese sauce, and you get a very different bowl each time. That flexibility reduces meal fatigue, which becomes a real problem long before most people expect it. Most packs last 2 to 3 years unopened, take almost no space, and stack easily. For a family on a budget, 2 or 3 cases can create a lot of emergency meal capacity for very little money. It is not glamorous, but grocery resilience rarely is. And once you have a base like ramen, the next question is, what goes under or beside everything else when fresh bread disappears first? Crackers are one of those quiet pantry items that become much more valuable when shopping gets irregular. Bread molds quickly, freezer space fills up, and fresh bakery prices rise faster than people expect. Crackers step in as the stable substitute. They work with peanut butter, canned tuna, canned chicken, cheese spread, soup, canned salmon, or just a little butter and salt when choices are thin. Most sealed varieties hold for 12 to 18 months, and the better move is to diversify. Butter crackers, whole grain, multigrain, saltines. Different textures matter more than you think when your pantry starts repeating itself. Crackers also solve a practical problem. They create instant structure for other foods. You do not need to cook them, toast them, or refrigerate them. The financial advantage is simple. A few dollars spent now can replace a lot of more expensive convenience foods later. Just protect them after opening. Crackers go stale fast and humidity ruins them quietly. Move open sleeves into zip bags or sealed containers. It sounds minor until you lose 3 boxes in one damp week. And if crackers are the base, a little fat and flavor can turn them from emergency food into a decent meal. Shelf-stable cheese is one of the most underrated comfort upgrades in any stockpile. A lot of shoppers do not even realize how many forms of it exist. Wax-coated rounds, processed cheese spreads, sealed cheese dips, shelf-stable blocks, even some boxed cheese products that hold for months. Depending on the type, you can get anywhere from 3 to 6 months without refrigeration, sometimes more. That matters because fat is not optional in a high-stress pantry. It adds calories, flavor, and satiety. Put shelf-stable cheese on crackers, stir it into ramen, melt it over potatoes, or mix it into rice. Suddenly, the same basic ingredients stop tasting repetitive. For families, that makes a bigger difference than nutrition labels alone would suggest. It is also a financial buffer. Fresh dairy prices are vulnerable to feed costs, transport costs, and refrigeration issues. Shelf-stable options lock in a known price now. Rotate a few varieties every couple of months and use them in normal cooking so nothing gets wasted. Once you start thinking in terms of versatile protein and fat layers, canned chicken becomes the next obvious workhorse. Canned chicken does not get much attention because it is not exciting. That is exactly why it belongs in a serious pantry. A typical can gives you around 25 to 30 grams of protein, requires zero refrigeration, and can move into almost any meal without much effort. Soups, wraps, rice bowls, pasta, crackers, ramen, mashed potatoes. It is one of the least fussy proteins on the shelf. The other advantage is price stability. Fresh chicken has been bouncing around with feed costs, labor, and transport pressures, but canned chicken still often offers a predictable cost per serving. That matters when your goal is not just stocking calories, but stocking usable protein that does not demand planning. Shelf life is usually 3 to 5 years, sometimes longer depending on the brand and storage conditions. Keep enough on hand to build meals, not just snacks. That is the difference between a pantry that looks full and one that actually functions. And if protein keeps the pantry practical, the next item helps keep it livable, especially in households with children. Applesauce cups are easy to underestimate because they look like lunchbox food. In reality, they solve 3 problems at once. They are shelf-stable, require no prep, and give you a soft, sweet option when everything else in the pantry starts leaning salty, beige, and heavy. For families, that can matter a lot more than it sounds. Most individual cups hold for up to 18 months. They stack neatly, portion cleanly, and travel well. They are also useful beyond snacking. If eggs get expensive or scarce, applesauce can replace eggs in many baking recipes at about half a cup per egg. That is the kind of practical pantry substitution people usually discover only after prices spike. There is also a morale advantage. During stressful periods, familiar sweetness goes a long way, especially for kids who may not adapt well to sudden food changes. Stock 2 or 3 cases and rotate them normally. Not every smart pantry item has to be dramatic. Some just quietly make the whole system easier to live with. And speaking of small items doing oversized work, tomato paste is one of the best examples in any grocery aisle. Tomato paste is concentrated value. A small can costs very little, stores for roughly 18 months to 2 years sealed, and can transform several meals in a row. Stir a spoonful into rice, soup, beans, pasta, lentils, or canned meat, and suddenly the meal has depth. Without that, many stockpile foods start tasting flat very quickly. This is where a lot of grocery budgeting goes wrong. People focus only on bulk starches and forget flavor infrastructure. Tomato paste is flavor infrastructure. One can stretch across 3 or 4 meals, which makes its cost per use almost absurdly low. It also brings some practical nutrition, including lycopene and a bit of vitamin C, but the real power is culinary leverage. Buy by the case when prices are reasonable. Once opened, move leftovers into a sealed container or freeze in spoonful portions. Tiny ingredient, huge impact. And once you start building meals from pantry basics, the next category becomes harder to ignore because price pressure on produce tends to show up quickly and painfully. Canned corn earns its place because it does two things well at the same time. It adds a vegetable to the plate, and it adds actual comfort. It is sweet, familiar, easy to use, and flexible enough for soups, rice bowls, casseroles, chili, or simple side dishes. In a week of pantry meals, that brightness matters. It also holds value. Canned corn usually lasts 2 to 3 years, retains a useful share of its nutrition, and bypasses the volatility that hits fresh produce when fertilizer and transport costs rise. That is the part many households miss. When input prices climb, vegetables are often among the first places you feel it. Fresh produce gets smaller, older, and more expensive. A dozen cans is not excessive. It is a reasonable baseline for a family pantry. Variety in vegetables keeps a stockpile from becoming starch with different names. And once you begin thinking beyond calories and into micronutrients, the next item seems unusual at first, but makes a surprising amount of sense. Dried seaweed is one of those foods that sounds niche until you look at what it does. It is lightweight, compact, shelf-stable for up to 2 years, and unusually rich in iodine, along with useful amounts of minerals like magnesium and iron. In a pantry built around grains and canned goods, those small nutritional advantages become more important over time. Fresh produce can disappear, get expensive, or simply become less available in quality form. Your body does not adjust its needs just because the grocery store changed. Seaweed helps cover part of that gap, especially for iodine, which many people do not think about until they are not getting enough. Nori sheets, seaweed snacks, and wakame flakes are all easy to store. Use them in ramen, rice bowls, soups, or eat them straight as a salty snack. It is not the centerpiece of a pantry, but that is not its job. Its job is to add minerals, flavor variety, and one more angle of resilience. By now, you are probably noticing a pattern. The smartest pantry items are not always the flashiest. They are the ones that do more than one thing at once. Granola is a good example of that pattern. It is breakfast, snack, portable fuel, and in some cases dessert if morale gets low enough. Most bags last 6 to 12 months sealed, and the better varieties give you a useful mix of oats, nuts, and fat that holds energy more steadily than candy or sugary breakfast pastries. That matters because tired, stressed households make worse food decisions. If your only quick options are sugar-heavy, you pay for it twice, once at the register and again in the energy crash an hour later. Granola with shelf-stable milk, yogurt drinks, or even dry by the handful gives you a fast meal that feels reasonably normal. Store several varieties so breakfast does not become punishment. Cinnamon, nut blends, fruit blends, lower sugar versions. A little flavor rotation goes a long way. And if dry breakfast options help with routine, the next item helps with something equally important during disruptions: hydration that does not feel monotonous. Shelf-stable juice is not a necessity in the strict survival sense, but it becomes surprisingly useful in real households. Fresh fruit often gets expensive early in any supply squeeze, and shelf-stable juice boxes or cartons preserve some of that category in a form that lasts 12 to 18 months unopened. Juice offers quick sugar, a little vitamin support, and just enough variety to break the endless cycle of plain water. It is especially helpful for children, for low appetite days, or for masking the taste of less appealing foods or supplements. A pantry that works in real life has to consider compliance, not just theory. 2 or 3 cases is a practical amount for many families. Rotate through them normally and buy when on sale. Small comforts become important much faster than people assume. And if the goal is reducing meal effort while keeping nutrition reasonably intact, dry soup mixes may be one of the best values on the entire list. Dry soup mixes are the pantry equivalent of hiring a competent assistant. Beans, lentils, barley, dried vegetables, and seasonings come pre-assembled in one bag, waiting for water and heat. That means less planning, less measuring, and less room for error when life is already noisy. Most varieties last around 2 years sealed, some longer. The value is excellent because you're buying a near-complete meal rather than a single ingredient. Protein, fiber, starch, vegetables, flavor. It is all there. In cost per meal terms, they often beat a lot of frozen and canned convenience options by a wide margin. Stock multiple styles: lentil, split pea, minestrone, bean blends. Flavor rotation matters more than people expect. A pantry fails psychologically before it fails calorically. And once you already have soups, noodles, and starches on hand, pasta sauce becomes a simple way to unlock more combinations with almost no extra effort. Jarred pasta sauce is not just for pasta. That is the first reason to stock it. A decent marinara can become pizza sauce on crackers, a tomato base for soup, a simmer sauce for canned chicken, or a flavor boost for rice and beans. One jar can create several different meals if you use it strategically. Most unopened jars last 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer. The economics are straightforward. Buying sauce on sale now is cheaper than trying to recreate the same flavor later from separate ingredients that may all cost more by then. It also saves time, and time has value during disruptions, even if no one puts it on the receipt. Choose a few styles so meals do not blur together. Marinara, roasted garlic, spicy versions, maybe a richer tomato basil. The base ingredients may be similar, but the eating experience changes enough to matter. And this is where things get more serious, because vegetables become a much bigger issue once fresh produce pricing starts climbing hard. Dehydrated vegetables are compact insurance against future produce inflation. Carrots, peas, onions, peppers, celery, green beans. Once dried, they weigh very little, take up a fraction of the shelf space of canned vegetables, and can last anywhere from 3 years to well over a decade depending on packaging. Their practical value is simple. They let you add real vegetables to soups, rice, noodles, and stews without relying on the produce aisle staying affordable. When fertilizer costs rise, produce often feels it quickly because margins are already thin. That is when a few bags of dried vegetables start looking much smarter than they did at purchase. They also improve the quality of pantry meals. Better flavor, more texture, a little fiber, more color. Those details matter over weeks, not just days. Buy several varieties and keep them sealed well. And while we are talking about long stretches of shelf-stable eating, this is a good point to pause for a question. How many of the foods you buy every week would still make sense if fresh groceries got 15 or 20% more expensive by fall? That pattern is the whole point here. The smart household is not the one that panics. It is the one that notices the pricing logic early. Shelf-stable pudding mix may sound like an indulgence, but in a serious pantry it serves a real purpose. Not every item has to maximize protein or shelf life. Some items protect routine, mood, and appetite. When meals become repetitive, small desserts can make the entire pantry more sustainable. Research on stress and eating behavior is clear enough on one point. Familiar comfort foods can reduce friction during difficult periods. A box of pudding mix costs very little, stores well, and gives you a simple treat that still feels like normal life. Chocolate, vanilla, butterscotch. Nothing dramatic, just relief from monotony. That may sound soft compared with rice and beans, but households are emotional systems, not spreadsheets. A pantry that people actually want to eat from is more useful than a theoretically perfect one that everyone dreads. And if you want a single can that behaves like a complete meal, the next item earns its place quickly. Canned chili is one of the strongest convenience proteins on the shelf. Open it cold if you must, heat it if you can, pour it over rice, spoon it onto crackers, or stretch it with potatoes. In one can, you often get protein, fat, carbohydrates, seasoning, and enough flavor that it does not feel like assembly work. Depending on the variety, a can may offer 20 to 30 grams of protein. That is serious utility, especially as beef prices keep climbing. Herd sizes have been tight, retail prices have moved up sharply over the past several years, and any shelf-stable beef product that locks in today's price deserves attention. Mix bean-heavy and meat-heavy versions for flexibility and cost control. It is one of the easiest ways to create a complete meal from the pantry with minimal energy and equipment. But if chili handles dinner well, another category helps with something people often forget until they miss it badly: fresh bread. Shelf-stable bread mix solves a subtle but important problem. Most people imagine emergency bread making means yeast, proofing, and a process they do not actually use in normal life. Bread mixes simplify that. Many rely on baking powder or self-rising flour, so you often just add water and bake, or turn the dough into skillet flatbread. Fresh bread changes the emotional temperature of a home. That sounds sentimental, but it is also practical. It improves meals, stretches soups, supports canned meats, and gives breakfast or dinner a sense of normal structure. In a market where store-bought bread can become both pricier and less reliable, a few mixes are a low-cost hedge. Keep 3 or 4 in rotation and actually use them. The best pantry is one that already fits your habits. And while bread restores normality, powdered peanut butter does something equally useful in much less space. Powdered peanut butter is one of the better examples of shelf efficiency. You get the familiar flavor and much of the protein, but in a lighter, smaller form that stores for 4 to 5 years sealed. Reconstitute it with water, stir it into oatmeal, spread it on crackers, blend it into smoothies, or add it to sauces. Regular peanut butter is still useful, of course, but it takes up more room and can go rancid sooner. Powdered peanut butter gives you another option, especially if shelf space is limited. That matters more than people think. Pantry planning is not just about price, it is about cubic feet. A couple of containers can replace a surprising amount of bulk while still giving you comfort, calories, and protein. And once you start optimizing storage efficiency, instant rice noodles deserve a look as another fast-cooking base that broadens the menu without much cost. Instant rice noodles cook quickly, store well for up to 2 years, and behave differently enough from ramen that they genuinely add variety. That may sound trivial until you have been eating wheat noodles repeatedly. Texture matters. So does digestibility, especially for households with gluten sensitivity. Use them with broth, canned meats, soy sauce, dried seaweed, dehydrated vegetables, or a spoon of chili. They work across several cuisines without demanding much skill. Asian grocery stores often price them well, making them one of the more affordable ways to diversify a pantry beyond the usual pasta aisle. 2 or 3 bags of different widths or styles can quietly improve your whole backup food system. And while we are on overlooked starches, canned potatoes deserve far more attention than they get. Canned potatoes are already cooked, which means they save both time and fuel. Open the can and they are ready for soups, stews, skillet meals, hash, or quick mashing. In an environment where water, energy, and patience may all be tighter than usual, that convenience matters. They also last 3 to 5 years sealed and pair with almost everything on this list. Add them to canned chili, fry them with canned ham, mash them with cheese, or bulk out soup. They are affordable, filling, and strangely ignored by a lot of shoppers who walk right past them. That usually keeps prices reasonable, which is fine by anyone paying attention. Stock a dozen cans and you will understand their value quickly. And since changing diets can be hard on digestion, the next item addresses a problem many emergency lists barely mention. Shelf-stable yogurt drinks are a niche item, but a useful one if you can find them. Some brands package drinkable yogurt or cultured dairy beverages to hold for months without refrigeration. That gives you protein, calcium, and in some cases probiotic support in a pantry-friendly format. Why does that matter? Because when a household shifts from fresh foods to mostly shelf-stable foods, digestion often changes too. More sodium, fewer fresh foods, different fibers, different routines. A small amount of probiotic support can make that transition easier. It is not magic, it is just practical. Check labels and rotate carefully because not all products in this category are the same. But for households building a well-rounded pantry rather than a purely calorie-based one, this is a smart ad. And if speed is the priority, energy bars remain one of the most efficient grab-and-go options available. Energy bars do exactly what many pantry foods do not. They remove all friction. No water, no stove, no utensils, no cleanup. Just 200 to 400 calories in a package that slips into a bag, glove box, desk drawer, or emergency bin. That makes them useful not just for home stockpiling, but for disruptions that happen while you are away from home. Choose bars with at least around 10 grams of protein and not too much added sugar. Some are basically candy bars and activewear. Better bars buy you convenience without the energy crash. Most keep for 12 to 24 months sealed, depending on the brand. Store a variety box in a cool, dark place and rotate through it. Convenience is expensive when bought reactively at gas stations and airport kiosks. It is much cheaper when you buy it ahead. And if bars cover speed, dried fruit covers something just as important: sweetness with actual substance. Dried fruit gives you natural sugar, fiber, minerals, and chew, which sounds simple until you realize how much pantry food lacks texture variety. Raisins, dates, apricots, mango slices, cranberries. They all bring a slightly different kind of relief from the endless pattern of starch, salt, and cans. Shelf life usually runs 1 to 2 years sealed, and dates in particular are remarkably calorie-dense for a whole food. They have lasted as travel and survival food for centuries for a reason. They store well, hit fast, and feel satisfying in a way many processed snacks do not. Keep several kinds on hand and reseal tightly after opening. They are useful in oatmeal, granola, trail mix, baking, or straight out of the bag. And if you have been tracking protein prices lately, the next item becomes especially interesting because it sits right at the intersection of inflation and practicality. Canned ham is one of the strongest backup proteins available while beef remains expensive. Beef prices have climbed sharply over the past several years, herd sizes remain historically tight, and relief is not likely to arrive quickly. Canned ham offers a fully cooked alternative that is dense, versatile, and often feeds several people from one container. Slice it onto crackers, dice it into soup, fry it with potatoes, stir it into rice, or serve it cold. A larger can can deliver 60 to 100 grams of protein depending on size. Shelf life often lands in the 2 to 5 year range. That is a lot of usable food in one can. This is one of those purchases that looks ordinary until fresh meat prices jump again. Then it starts to look clever. Buy while the price still feels merely annoying instead of ridiculous. And speaking of quality of life items that become far more important than expected, powdered sports drink mix belongs higher on lists than most people put it. Powdered sports drink mix is not just for athletes. It is for situations where water gets boring, appetite drops, heat rises, or electrolytes need replacing. Stored dry, these powders or tablets last a very long time, weigh very little, and turn plain water into something easier to drink consistently. That matters more than people admit. Hydration compliance is real. People do not always drink enough when the only option is plain water, especially children and older adults. A little flavor can solve that. In hot weather or high-stress conditions, some electrolyte support also helps. Keep a few containers or tubes on hand. It is a small spend with a disproportionate payoff in comfort and usability. And once you appreciate how a simple add-in changes an entire meal or routine, shelf-stable Alfredo or cheese sauce makes perfect sense. Plain pasta fills you up. Pasta with a creamy sauce feels like dinner. That psychological gap is larger than it should be, but there it is. Shelf-stable Alfredo or cheese sauce turns rice, noodles, canned vegetables, or potatoes into meals that feel intentional instead of merely assembled. Most jars last around 12 to 24 months unopened. They are not the cheapest item per ounce on this list, but that is not the point. Their job is to increase the usefulness of cheaper base foods. A little sauce can rescue a meal that would otherwise feel flat and repetitive. Buy several jars and rotate them into normal cooking. Pantry success depends less on heroic stockpiling than on having foods your household already knows how to use. And while dinner usually gets the attention, breakfast is the meal many pantries neglect until the first inconvenient morning arrives. Dehydrated hash browns solve breakfast with surprising elegance. Add water, a little oil, a pan, and a few minutes. That is it. Pair them with powdered eggs, canned ham, or shelf-stable cheese, and suddenly the day starts with something that feels recognizably normal. They store for 3 to 5 years when kept properly, stay lightweight, and deliver multiple servings from one bag or carton. More importantly, they preserve routine. Breakfast is not just calories. It is the meal that tells a household whether the day feels manageable. That may sound philosophical for potatoes, but anyone who has tried to improvise breakfast for a family several mornings in a row knows it is not. And if hash browns cover comfort starch, vacuum-sealed nuts cover one of the most overlooked needs in emergency planning: quality fat. Nuts are compact, calorie-dense, and nutritionally efficient. An ounce of mixed nuts gives you roughly 160 to 180 calories, some protein, and fats that actually sustain fullness. Almonds, walnuts, cashews, peanuts, pecans. Each brings a slightly different texture and nutrient profile, but the larger point is this: fat keeps a pantry from becoming a blood sugar roller coaster. Vacuum-sealed nuts usually hold 12 to 24 months at room temperature, longer in cool storage. They are excellent for snacking, adding to granola, pairing with dried fruit, or stretching meals that need more energy density. They are also less processed than many shelf snacks, which can help with satiety and more stable energy. At this point, the pattern should be clear. The best stockpile foods are not just cheap. They are useful, compact, and adaptable. Which brings us to one of the strongest long-term produce strategies on this list. Freeze-dried vegetables are expensive upfront, but the time horizon changes the calculation. Properly stored, they can last 25 to 30 years. That is why they sit in the top tier of serious pantry planning. Broccoli, peas, carrots, spinach, peppers, corn. You get produce that can wait out a very long period without asking much from you. Freeze-drying preserves texture and nutrients better than many people expect, often better than standard dehydration. Add water, and they come back surprisingly close to useful cooking form. That matters if your concern is not just the next few months, but the broader trend of recurring food, inflation, and supply instability. If fertilizer shortages and transport costs keep rippling through agriculture, durable produce becomes more than a niche preparedness item. It becomes a hedge against future grocery volatility. Buy from reputable brands and start with 2 or 3 large cans. They are not cheap, but neither is replacing fresh vegetables during repeated price spikes. Long-grain white rice in sealed food-grade buckets is one of the most powerful pantry anchors you can own. A 5-gallon bucket holds roughly 30 to 35 pounds, which can translate to around 300 servings depending on portion size. Stored with oxygen absorbers in a cool, dark place, white rice can last 25 to 30 years. This is where grocery math gets very plain. Rice is cheap per serving, neutral in flavor, easy to pair with almost anything, and globally important enough that market pressure tends to show up quickly when agricultural inputs tighten. If fertilizer costs keep rising, grain prices will feel it. And because corn and other feed crops affect so much of the wider food system, pressure in one area rarely stays isolated. 1 bucket per person is a sensible minimum for households serious about resilience. Not because the world is ending, but because long shelf-life staples buy you options. And that leads directly to the most overlooked item of all, the one that determines whether half this list is truly usable or just decorative preparedness. Emergency water storage is number 1, because water outranks food every time. A person can go weeks without eating. Without water, the timeline gets much shorter. That is the uncomfortable fact many stockpile lists treat as an afterthought. Water is not just for drinking. It is for cooking rice, rehydrating potatoes, making soup, mixing drinks, cleaning hands, basic sanitation, and handling small injuries. Without clean water, much of a food stockpile becomes difficult or impossible to use safely. FEMA's bare minimum is about 1 gallon per person per day. In real life, especially with cooking and basic hygiene, closer to 2 gallons per person per day is often more realistic. For a family of 4, that adds up quickly. A 2-week supply can mean 60 gallons or more. Most households are nowhere near that. The good news is that the fix is straightforward. Stackable jugs, water bricks, storage barrels, sealed pouches, and backup filters like Sawyer or LifeStraw systems are widely available. Label stored water, rotated every 6 to 12 months, and keep it away from sunlight, heat, and chemical fumes. This is the foundation. Without water, the rice bucket is just a bucket. The freeze-dried vegetables are just dry fragments. The powdered drinks are decorative. Water makes the pantry functional. And that is really the larger pattern behind this entire list. The grocery store does not change all at once. First, it is fertilizer pressure, then crop stress, then smaller harvests, tighter transport, higher input costs, and finally the moment a family notices the same cart costs $40 or $60 more than it did not long ago. By then, the cheapest buying window is gone. The point is not to panic buy 31 items in one afternoon and turn your garage into a small warehouse. The point is to move early, while prices are still merely irritating instead of punishing. Pick 5 items this week. Then add a few more next week. Build a pantry that matches how your household actually eats. That is what being prepared really looks like. Not fear. Not drama. Just paying attention sooner than most people do. And in a period like this, that alone can save a household a meaningful amount of money, stress, and last-minute scrambling. If this helped you think differently about grocery spending and food security, consider subscribing. And if one item on this list surprised you, keep that in mind the next time you walk through the store. The smartest purchases are often the ones that look the least dramatic when you make them.